I knew something was off when I walked into the break room and found Martin asleep upright, chin slumped on his chest, a half-eaten granola bar still in his hand. It was Sunday. Again. No one had asked him to come in. No one ever did. But there he was, hunched over his laptop like a damn ghost, keeping the whole damn company afloat while the rest of us were off enjoying our weekends, or, in Amanda's case, curating her LinkedIn thought leadership posts. I didn't wake him, just stood there for a minute and watched the blinking terminal on his screen, a stream of automated logs flowing like a heartbeat only he understood. Martin had been here 19 years. Same cubicle, same thermos, same beat-up pair of New Balances under his desk. He never complained. Never fished for praise. Just did the work. Quiet, precise, like a metronome no one noticed until it stopped ticking. We joked that the building would collapse without him. But the sad part? It wasn't a joke. If you're listening right now and haven't subscribed yet, please do. It's just a tap, and it really motivates the team to keep bringing these stories to life. And if you're the kind of person who's worked through a Sunday and didn't get so much as a thanks, this one's for you. Like the video if you've ever been the one holding everything together while someone else took the credit. Back to Martin. He trained me when I started. Quietly, without fanfare. HR didn't even assign anyone. He just stepped in when he saw me struggling with the new ops dashboard. Over time, I realized that half the tools we use didn't exist in any manual. They worked, sure, like magic, scripts that automated tasks no one understood, reports that seemed to generate themselves, vendor pipelines that healed like digital skin, but none of it was documented. Just quiet folders with weird names like Flowbrain Legacy and Liliops Core. Amanda, on the other hand, couldn't code a macro if her life depended on it. But she was brilliant at something else. Office theater. If Martin was the heartbeat, Amanda was the heartbeat monitor. Loud, shiny, and utterly useless without what was behind it. She wore blazers 2 sizes too small for effect, smiled like she was running for office, and talked like every sentence was a TED Talk. Leadership presence, the execs called it. Soft power. What they didn't see was the 3-hour lunches, the endless happy hour networking, and the way she panicked every time a vendor call involved anything more technical than a password reset. Once, I saw her confuse 2 major clients on a call. Martin fixed it before the call ended, patched the order routing, wrote a script to triage the delay, and even emailed the client himself, signed as her. She never knew. She just beamed as the client praised her team's responsiveness. Martin never said a word. That was his way. No drama, no credit. Just a cigarette on the loading dock after, and maybe a nod if you caught his eye. We all knew the company was glued together with his blood, sweat, and God knows what in his encrypted folders. But he never made us feel small for not knowing how it all worked. He just kept the machine humming, even when they forgot to invite him to the very meetings that relied on his work. I remember once he got left out of a department photo. Total accident, they said. But the photographer looked confused when we all pointed it out. Martin was the only one not in the list. I watched him take the picture anyway, standing off to the side, coffee in hand, then walking away before the flash even went off. He wasn't bitter, just tired. There was a rhythm to his weeks. Mondays were cleanup days, patching the crap Amanda didn't understand from the weekend's marketing debacles. Wednesdays, he ran something he called system linting, which I only know because once I saw it flash across his screen before he minimized the terminal. Fridays, he backed up everything to a drive he always took home. Never left it at the office, ever. No one noticed. Or, rather, they noticed what he did. They just never asked how it got done. Never bothered to learn. Not Amanda. Not leadership. Not even the new CTO who called him dependable but not executive material. That's when I saw it. The flicker in Martin's eyes, not rage, not even hurt. Just the slow, sinking realization that they were never going to see him. Not really. Not unless something broke. Something big. And I think that's when he started planning. The email came through on a rainy Thursday like a slap in the middle of a yawn. We're opening a new senior director of operations position. Applications due by end of next week. The kind of announcement that hits a floor like ours with the subtlety of a brick through a windshield. Everyone pretended not to care while secretly calculating odds like we were betting ponies. Martin didn't react. just kept sipping that bitter coffee he brewed in the dented Mr. Coffee from 2009, the one he refused to let them replace. But I caught the twitch in his jaw. Subtle. Barely there. The same look he gave when someone touched the server rack without grounding themselves. "You gonna apply?" I asked, half teasing, half hoping. He shrugged, but his fingers stopped typing. "You've basically been doing that job since Amanda still thought back-end ops was a gym class," I said. That got a faint smirk. "I'll think about it," he muttered, eyes not leaving the screen. But by Monday, I saw him drafting something. Not a slideshow, not a mood board or a vision manifesto. Just 2 clean pages, bullet points, numbers. Improved vendor throughput by 48% over 5 years. Reduced downtime incidents from 17 per quarter to under 2. Designed and deployed autonomous ticket routing without external license cost. Facts. Cold, sharp facts. Meanwhile, Amanda was already booking meeting rooms for her pitch sessions. She printed laminated versions of her slides. I swear to God, one of them had the words "holistic leadership vibe" in a bubble font next to a picture of her at a charity 5K. Her submission included a QR code linking to a YouTube video called "Leadership is a Verb." The office buzzed with speculation. Amanda played the game like she invented it. Baked cookies, complimented Linda's shoes, dropped words like synergy and growth mindset like she got paid per syllable. She even wore glasses one day to look more analytical, then took them off halfway through a meeting for impact. Martin just kept doing what he always did, fixing what everyone else broke, including Amanda. That week, Amanda was in charge of transitioning the quarterly vendor review process to a new dashboard. She moved 1 column wrong in a shared spreadsheet and accidentally canceled 3 active vendor accounts. By the time Linda figured it out, there were already 2 nasty emails from suppliers asking why we'd nuked our agreements mid-cycle. Amanda panicked. She was pacing around the kitchen, flapping her hands like a bird in a microwave. "The system's down," she shrieked to no one. "This whole platform is unstable. We need it." Martin didn't even blink. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket, plugged into the wall terminal, and ran a command window I'd never seen before. 10 seconds. Done. Amanda was still breathing into her coffee lid when he leaned over and said, "Check now." How did you sorted column B alphabetically and pushed nulls to the API. It wasn't unstable, just dumb." She blinked. "Well, thank God someone knows this stuff. I mean, you're so reliable, Martin." She clapped him on the shoulder like she'd just knighted him with a foam sword and strutted back to her desk like nothing had happened. That night, Martin updated a folder called Failsafes 2022 and renamed a backup log entry with a quiet note. "Amanda, Maikan Q2 handoff, screw up a final." I asked if he was really going to submit the application. He looked at me for a long second. "Why not?" he said. "Let's pretend merit still matters." He hit send on the application at 8:06 p.m. The timestamp was exact. I know because I saw the Outlook notification on the shared inbox while working late. 2 minutes later, Amanda forwarded her submission to half the executive team and added her personal Canva presentation in the body of the email. Subject line: "Your next ops. Shiro, let's build the future together." I nearly threw my monitor out the window, but Martin? He just shut his laptop, picked up his thermos, and said, "If they want glitter over grit, let them find out the cost." I didn't know it yet, but that was the last time I'd see him fill out any internal form again. The announcement came in like a fart in church, silent in the moment, deafening in the fallout. Amanda had been named Senior Director of Operations. A mass email from Linda herself, subject line, "Exciting Leadership Update." I opened it with a stomach full of battery acid. Amanda demonstrated exceptional leadership energy, it said, a people-first mindset and high emotional intelligence. Not a word about her operational knowledge, not a single mention of experience, systems, logistics, vendor alignment, nothing. You could have swapped her resume with a Pinterest board titled Girl Boss Era, and no one would have blinked. I stood at my desk in disbelief, but Martin? Martin just leaned back in his chair, took a long sip from his thermos, and calmly shut his laptop like he was finishing a crossword puzzle. Then he stood up, walked to Linda's office, and knocked once. Walked in. The door stayed cracked open. All I heard was him say, Congratulations to Amanda. And then, like it was nothing, he handed Linda a plain envelope. She opened it, started to read, and froze. The room went so quiet, I swear I could hear the toner cartridge gasping in the copy machine down the hall. You're joking, Linda muttered. Martin didn't flinch. Nope. My 2 weeks, effective immediately. You can't be serious. Her voice was climbing. Deadly. She stood. Martin, this is incredibly unprofessional. He tilted his head, slow. So is replacing competence with charisma and calling it strategy. I didn't hear what came next. The door shut with a gentle click, not a slam, not a dramatic exit, just a full stop, like closing a casket. He walked back to his desk, grabbed the drive he always carried, and slid his employee badge into a plain manila folder. No farewell email, no speech, no donut party. Just one nod toward me and a half smile that said, "Watch what happens next." Amanda strutted in 30 minutes later in a blazer that looked like it had been skinned off a highlighter and immediately called a team sync. "We're entering a new chapter," she chirped, clicking her little Bluetooth presenter like she was launching a rocket. "I want to streamline workflows, energize team dynamics, and, really activate cross-functional synergy." Someone asked about our invoice pipeline. She blinked. "Is that finance?" I saw 3 heads turn to where Martin's desk had been. "Okay, no worries," she said quickly, smiling wider. "We'll circle back." Then she pulled up a dashboard and went pale. Does anyone know what this error means? There's a red bar. That can't be good, right?" It was the first time someone actually said out loud, "Maybe Martin should have trained someone before leaving." I didn't say a word, because I knew. I knew she'd asked him to create a transition doc, and I knew he'd sent her exactly one file, a PDF that said, in size 72 font, "You got this." That night, the first set of vendor reports didn't get filed. One client emailed me directly asking if we'd changed point of contact. Amanda forwarded it to legal and said, "Can someone craft a brand-safe response?" That was day 1. By day 3, she was already blaming the tools. "These systems are so clunky," she huffed during an exec stand-up. "It's almost like they weren't built with scale in mind." Someone said quietly, "Martin built those." Amanda's smile twitched. "Well, I plan to modernize everything. Disruption is necessary for growth." Martin, meanwhile, had gone dark. His email kicked back with an auto response. "I no longer work at Carlton Metrics. For technical inquiries, please contact your new Senior Director of Operations. Best of luck." The silence after that was louder than any goodbye speech he could have made, and in that silence the cracks began to widen. Martin didn't take the service elevator like most people do when they quit. No sneaking out, no cardboard box full of dusty desk plants and stress balls. He walked out the front door of Carlton Metrics with just a worn leather laptop bag and a half-rolled thermal coffee mug clipped to the side like a badge of honor. The security guard nodded at him. Martin nodded back. That was it. 19 years of devotion and weekends and silent patchwork, gone in 30 steps and a sliding glass whoosh. Most people didn't even know he was leaving. Linda hadn't told the floor. HR hadn't sent a goodbye card. Amanda was too busy trying to get her Slack profile photo professionally retouched. But a few of us knew. I stood by the window and watched him cross the street. It was drizzling. He didn't use an umbrella, just pulled up the collar of his jacket and vanished into the blur of brake lights. I checked my email later that night, more out of habit than anything. That's when I saw the auto response. "Thank you for your message. I am no longer with Carlton Metrics. For operational or technical questions, please contact your new Senior Director of Operations. Documentation requests may be directed to the Operations Transformation Committee." There was no such committee. That was the joke. The whole damn ops function had been Martin's committee, and no one realized until it was already on fire. About 2 hours later, he got the call. He didn't brag. He didn't post a cryptic LinkedIn update about new chapters or rising like a phoenix. That wasn't Martin. But he told me, eventually, quietly, like he was passing along a weather report. "Remember Hawthorne and Yates? The logistics consultancy with the weird neon chairs in their lobby?" "Yeah," I said, blinking. "You interviewed with them?" "Couple months ago, just in case." "And?" "They offered. Today." He said it like he was announcing a grocery sale. I had to double take. Wait, they called you? After you resigned? Apparently, they've been following Carlton's supplier response times. Noticed a pattern. Asked who handled it. Someone dropped my name. He sipped his coffee like this was all normal. Said they'd double my current salary, match tenure benefits, and I'd get final say on ops structure. I nearly choked on my tea. You're going? I already said yes. And that was Martin. 19 years of being overlooked, and his revenge was just being wanted somewhere else. Not with a tantrum. Not with lawsuits or social media takedowns. Just a clean transfer of power from fools to people who actually knew what they had. I asked him if he was going to say anything to Linda, if he'd respond to the panicked messages I knew she'd be sending soon. He shook his head. Let the silence explain it. He did send one final thing before shutting down his old email completely. He BCC'd a handful of people, including me, on a forwarded chain from 2 years back. The subject line, Automation Ownership and License Clarification. It was a thread between him, IT, and HR. In it, he clearly laid out that many of the systems he developed were done on his own time, with his own resources, and that unless explicitly transferred via contract, they remained his property. HR had responded with one line. Noted. Please ensure documentation is saved to the shared drive. But Martin had never saved to the shared drive. That night, Amanda tried to ping him 6 times on Slack. All returned the same message. This user is no longer active. Her final message just said, Hey, quick Q, what's the password for the intake automation? No response. That was the beginning of the end. The cracks he'd left were intentional, not malicious, just natural, like pulling a keystone from a Jenga tower that looked sturdy until you touched it. Martin didn't rig the collapse. He just stopped holding it up. By day 4, the walls were buckling. Amanda called her first all-hands meeting with the confidence of a pageant queen holding a grenade. She stood in front of the projector screen in heels too loud for her shaky footing and opened with, So I know we're all adjusting to the new normal, but let's be real. We got this, right? Silence. Half the team hadn't received their updated vendor lists. The offshore reconciliation schedule hadn't been updated since Martin left, which meant 2 regions were out of sync, and 3 clients were now asking why they'd received the same invoice 3 times. Amanda smiled wider. I know it's been a rocky few days, but I'm putting together a new system. Cleaner, fresher, less, legacy noise. When someone asked what happened to the automated triage dashboard, she waved it off. We're not going to rely on crutches. We need to own our workflows, not just click buttons. The irony, of course, was that clicking those buttons was the only thing keeping the place from catching fire. By Friday, she was using words like reorg and pivot and lean-in moments. But nobody could find the daily compliance status sheet. The org chart still listed Martin as active in the shared drive because the HR portal wouldn't update without the nightly script Martin had written, one no one else could locate, let alone run. Then the real kicker. The weekly inbound ticket sorter started spitting out blanks. Amanda thought it was a glitch. She rebooted, restarted her laptop, tried refreshing the dashboard, and even called IT. That's when they found it. The automation backend was still pinging Martin's personal license key. Every time the process ran, it sent a verification request to a now-dead credential token tied to lyle.oppies.core, an external subdomain Martin had maintained privately. The system didn't crash. It just quietly failed to authenticate, then stopped pushing data. Silent. Efficient. Unforgiving. I watched Amanda's face go full ghost when I'd explained it in their weekly sync. So, we can't just restart it? She asked. Voice like a dying smoke detector. No, the engineer said flatly. The logic is proprietary. It's not in our repo, and even if we recreate it, we'd need months to reverse engineer the logic chains. But it was used here? Doesn't that make it ours? The engineer didn't laugh, just slowly blinked. He flagged that exact question 2 years ago, said he was working independently, that unless there was a formal transfer, the licensing remained personal. Amanda turned to Linda like a student asking to retake a test because the fire alarm went off. Did we ever, do that? Linda looked like someone had poured ice water down her spine. I don't know. Ask HR. But HR wasn't answering. because the whole office was now 24 hours behind on every core report, and the compliance team was running manual checks using spreadsheets Martin had long since automated. Everyone was copying and pasting like it was 2003. Meanwhile, Martin? He was at Hawthorne and Yates sipping espresso in a glass-walled meeting room with a view of the city. I know because he sent me a photo. Just the view, no caption. But I saw the gleam of a whiteboard in the background, and on it, the familiar architecture of the intake system he'd built at Carleton, only cleaner, sharper, refined. He didn't say a word, didn't rub it in. He didn't need to. Back at Carleton, Amanda began holding twice daily check-ins to ensure continuity, which really meant she was asking her direct reports to explain things she should have known before day one. People started muttering. Did she really think she could replace 19 years with a Canva deck? She actually said the system was clunky. Martin was the system. The office started calling it the Lyle effect, when something stopped working and no one knew why. Every time they tried to fix it, something else broke. Every time they asked IT to patch it, they found more code that wasn't theirs to touch. Every time Amanda opened her mouth, someone quietly opened LinkedIn. And Martin? He was still quiet. But I could feel him watching. By midweek, the IT team was running on fumes and rage, not the loud kind, no slamming keyboards or shouting down hallways, just tight jaws, dead stares, and too many monster cans stacked like warning towers around monitors. One engineer muttered, "It's like chasing ghosts with Post-its." Another just flat out said, "If I ever see that guy in public, I'm buying him a drink and asking for forgiveness." They'd finally opened the hood on what Martin had left behind, or rather, what he'd taken with him. And it wasn't sabotage. That's what made it worse. There were no traps, no malicious code, no corrupted backups. Everything technically still worked. It just needed him to work. Or more precisely, it needed his domain credentials to authenticate, sync, or initiate anything meaningful. The intake API hitched to a license registered to lilyops.dev. The vendor audit pipeline, executed nightly via a private task runner hosted on a server in martinsys.local. The invoice parser that had cut report times by 80%, tied to a cron job running on an encrypted external drive, one that hadn't seen the light of day since he walked out the front door. There were notes, sure, if you could call them that. Comment blocks in the code that read like existential haikus. If this fails, try breathing slower. Or, "You're looking in the wrong place. Stop digging. Go outside." Amanda tried to rally. She printed out flowcharts, pinned diagrams to whiteboards, even scheduled a brainstorm session with IT titled Decoding the Martin Matrix. I sat in the back, biting my cheek while she explained what she called a proactive schema reset. When someone asked what schema meant, she blinked. It's like the emotional core of a database. Even the printer choked on that one. It made their discovery later that afternoon, buried in an old email chain with legal and HR dated March 2020. Martin had asked very plainly whether his personally developed scripts, systems, and modules fell under company property or remained his. He included a list, 6 pages long, bullet points, attached contracts, and a reference to his consulting agreement from 2013 that technically made him a contracted systems strategist before he became a full-time employee. Legal responded with one line, "Not a priority right now. Please focus on performance metrics." That was it. No follow-up, no documentation updates, no asset claim. He'd warned them years ago, and they'd shrugged. Now Amanda was in HR's office 5 hours a day, trying to figure out if soft skills included CPR for enterprise infrastructure. Spoiler, they didn't. She tried sweet-talking IT, but they'd seen the Slack threads, the ones where she called Martin dead weight and joked about phasing out the dinosaur logic. One engineer printed that thread and taped it inside his locker under the heading, "Reasons we don't talk in meetings anymore." That Friday, a senior manager from HR, Dani, the kind of woman who always wore beige like it was armor, called Martin's cell. He didn't answer. She tried again, left a voicemail. "Hi, Martin. This is Dana with HR. We're hoping you might be willing to consult a bit on some of the systems you were involved with. We understand there may have been licensing misunderstandings, and we're very eager to find a collaborative solution." She didn't get a call back, just an email. One line. Per your March 2020 response, not my priority right now. No signature, no best regards, just a clean echo of their own words from years back. Amanda looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her curls were frizzed out like lightning had licked them. She canceled a Friday presentation on culture-driven ops uplift and disappeared for the rest of the day. Meanwhile, at Hawthorne and Yates, Martin was onboarding his new team. A junior engineer told me they'd set him up with a corner office, full autonomy, and a monthly innovation stipend just to keep building what he wanted. They even printed out his 2020 email and framed it in the hallway. Caption underneath, he warned them. And now? Now, Amanda couldn't even find the login to the vendor escalation dashboard because that login was tied to an encrypted token file labeled mandydon'ttouch.json. He hadn't sabotaged them. He just told the truth and let their own arrogance do the rest. The boardroom smelled like panic and dry erase fumes. Amanda sat at the far end of the glass table, her laptop open, lips pulled into that brittle pageant smile she wore whenever she had no idea what was happening. Across from her sat Alan Greaves, compliance lead, former IRS analyst, the kind of guy who once flagged a contract over a misplaced semicolon and made a project freeze for 3 weeks. Alan did not do small talk. He did paper trails, and right now, Amanda was the paper. We've had 6 vendor disruptions, he began flatly, 3 client billing inconsistencies, and 2 regulatory alerts from the SOC2 auditor, all in the last 11 days. Amanda blinked. Right, so I'm aware there's been a little turbulence. I've stepped into a role with a lot of moving pieces, and unfortunately, the transition wasn't as thorough as we'd have liked. Alan didn't blink. You were the transition. She coughed out a laugh. Look, the truth is, Martin didn't exactly leave things clean. He built this whole Frankenstein system and didn't document anything. That's the real problem. No one could have succeeded with that mess. Interesting, Alan replied, tapping a key on his laptop, because I have here 12 change approvals with your signature, all signed within the last 90 days, all relating to automation scope, API modification, and vendor access renewal. Would you like to explain those? Amanda glanced down at her screen like it might give her a lifeline. I was told they were routine. Martin always handled that stuff. You signed off on system changes you didn't review? They were approved previously, weren't they? He ran things. I assumed. You assumed, Alan echoed, pausing to let the silence do its damage. You assumed leadership meant signing blindly? She tried to pivot. It's about trust. Gut instinct. I empower my team. Your team was one man you didn't understand and quietly pushed out, Alan said, voice lowering. And you empowered him by removing him from meetings and calling him prehistoric on Slack. Shall I pull that log? Amanda flushed crimson. In the hallway outside, people pretended not to listen while lingering near the coffee machine. Word was spreading fast. Compliance was in the house, and Amanda was cracking. Meanwhile, Martin was half a city away in a sleek meeting room with his new team, onboarding 2 junior analysts and walking them through a dashboard he'd built from scratch. Here's how you trace logic from the front-end call to the API routing, he said calmly, gesturing to a screen that actually made sense. The junior dev nodded, eyes wide. This is clean, like scary clean. Martin smiled without ego. It's only clean if someone keeps it that way. Don't cut corners. Document everything. If you don't understand it, don't approve it. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Back at Carlton Metrics, Alan dropped the hammer. This isn't just about system failures, he said, voice like frost. It's about accountability. You signed off on a back-end routing process you didn't read, didn't understand, and didn't vet with IT or legal. And now we're facing potential non-compliance on 2 active audits. If this escalates, the company's liability lands squarely on whoever authorized those changes. Amanda's voice was barely above a whisper. It wasn't malicious, but it was negligent. Alan replied, There's a difference, and you're not paid to know the difference. You're paid to prevent it. She sat frozen, eyes darting between laptops, looking for a way out. There wasn't one. Someone once said Amanda made decisions from the heart. Turns out, the heart's not a credential, especially not when the audit log says your password-approved systems you couldn't even define. And outside that boardroom, the floor finally understood what had happened. She'd been bluffing the whole time, riding gut feelings into a minefield and smiling through the explosions. Martin hadn't sabotaged her. She did that all on her own, with a stylus and a signature line. And Martin? He was on a whiteboard, smiling softly, pointing to a handwritten note that read, "Never sign what you haven't built." They printed it out that afternoon and taped it to the wall. The letter hit Linda's desk like a verdict. Cream-colored, embossed envelope. No return address. Just the name of Martin's attorney in small, sharp lettering that felt colder than any cease and desist. She opened it with one of those gold-plated letter openers that never sees real action, slicing through her last thread of plausible deniability in one clean pass. Inside, 3 pages. No drama, no threats, just facts. It outlined in lawyer speak so clear even Amanda could have understood it, that the automation suites used by Carlton Metrics over the last 9 years, including but not limited to intake routing, invoice parsing, vendor compliance syncs, and reconciliation alerting, were all developed by Martin Lyle outside the scope of his full-time employment. The scripts had been maintained under a separate sublicense never formally transferred to Carlton, despite Martin's documented attempts to clarify ownership back in 2020. In other words, they didn't own a damn thing, and they knew it. The letter didn't ask for damages. Martin wasn't suing, he wasn't gloating, he wasn't coming for blood. He was offering a license, a real one, commercial use only, 1-year renewable, generous even, but not free. Attached was a formal licensing agreement, fee schedule, usage clauses, legal jargon so dry it could light a match. But it boiled down to this: pay to keep breathing or rebuild your lungs from scratch. Linda read it 3 times. By the 4th, her hand was visibly shaking. Amanda, who had somehow convinced herself things would magically normalize, sat across the room in silence, staring at her fingernails like maybe a fresh coat of polish would make this less her fault. Legal reviewed the document. Compliance flagged it as valid. HR finally pulled up the 2020 thread Martin had forwarded. There it was again. The polite, measured question he'd asked years ago about system ownership, and the even shorter brush-off HR had replied with. Not a priority right now. Now it was the only priority. They tried to lowball. Sent back a friendly counteroffer, citing the years he'd worked there, the collaborative nature of development, and the need for cost containment. Martin's lawyer returned it within 2 hours. Revised licensing fee, plout and 20%, because now it included retroactive liability coverage for systems that had already run live, unlicensed, for nearly 2 weeks. Linda folded. They signed. The license came through the next morning. Carlton's systems flickered back to life. The dashboards lit up, the logs resumed, but the comfort didn't return with them, just a grim realization. They hadn't hired a senior director of operations. They'd crowned a placeholder and lost the architect. Meanwhile, Martin was walking the floor of Hawthorne and Yates, calmly reviewing a rollout plan with his new team. His desk had a window now. His name was on a door, and 2 familiar client logos sat in a shared folder titled Onboarding Q4 Strategy, because in the chaos of Carlton's breakdown, 2 of their top clients, Carteron Logistics and Melrose Wholesale, had quietly reached out, not to the company, to Martin. Apparently, after 3 missed reports and a botched data handoff, they decided it was easier to switch partners than deal with the mess. And Hawthorne and Yates? They were happy to support. In his welcome meeting, Martin had mentioned the names casually, more as a scheduling note than a victory lap. They'll need a phased transition. Carteron's got some weird schema quirks. I already mapped him last year, he said, sipping coffee, unfazed. No gloating, no revenge speech, just competence. The kind you can't fake. That afternoon, Linda sent an all-staff email with the subject line, Structural Updates in Ops Leadership. Amanda's name was notably absent. Rumors said she was on leave. Others said she'd been offered a transition opportunity. No one cared enough to find out which. The only thing that mattered now was that Martin had the leverage, and he never raised his voice to get it. He just let their failures speak in the silence he left behind. The final staff meeting was scheduled under the vague title Ops Continuity and Strategic Accountability. Everyone knew what it meant. Linda entered 10 minutes late, eyes ringed like she'd slept inside a spreadsheet. Her jaw was locked, her blazer creased, two things that never happened unless a company was either being sold or burning from the inside out. The whole room reeked of stale panic and expensive toner. Amanda sat near the middle of the conference table. No laptop, no latte, just a stack of half-printed documents and a face that looked like she'd aged a decade in 3 weeks. Her lipstick had faded into the corners of her mouth like a smear of denial. When Linda slammed the folder on the table, the whole room jumped. "This," she snapped, jabbing a finger at the cover, "is everything we should have known before we handed over operations to a goddamn TED Talk with Wi-Fi." No one breathed. "Who the hell cleared this?" She barked at HR. Who thought a 5-slide PowerPoint and vibes were enough to replace 19 years of backbone? HR tried to stammer something about hiring standards and morale alignment, but no one was listening anymore. All eyes were on Amanda, who sat still as a taxidermy project, mouth opening and closing like a goldfish in a blender. Then came the knock. Alan Greaves, compliance's own Grim Reaper, stepped into the room with an auditor from the third-party review team. Black suit, blank expression, a folder thicker than Amanda's resume. "Quick question before we begin," he said, not even sitting down. "We're finalizing Q3 incident documentation. Who signed off on the back-end system checks the day the vendor dashboards failed?" Silence. The projector screen went dark. Someone coughed. A page turned in the auditor's folder with a whisper that felt louder than any shout. "According to logs," he continued, tapping the paper, "these credentials were used. Amanda Wilkes, OSH, Ops Live. That's your login, correct?" Amanda looked like she was being exercised in real time. I mean, yes, but I didn't write the system. Martin did all that. I trusted. You trusted, but you didn't verify," Alan cut in, sharp as glass. "You clicked, you signed, you vouched, and when it broke, your name was the only one on the digital trail." She tried to speak again, but Linda raised a hand, face pale and drawn. "Enough," she said. "You're relieved of your role, effective immediately. It has already disabled your access." Amanda didn't argue. She just nodded once and stood slowly, her chair creaking like even it wanted to distance itself. She walked out without a word. Her heels clicked down the hall, quieter than usual. No one clapped. No one even whispered. Linda looked around the room and muttered, "From now on, no one touches anything they can't explain to audit in under 10 words." Meanwhile, across town, in a sunlit office that didn't smell like fear, Martin sipped coffee in a quiet corner of Hawthorne and Yates's operations hub. His team was finalizing the handoff of yet another client. Another one who jumped ship after Carlton's dashboard errors caused delays in their Q3 procurement run. His phone buzzed. A new message. From CTO, Hawthorne and Yates. Subject: Thank you. Message: You saved us 6 months of chaos. Welcome aboard. That audit checklist you built? We're folding it into our company playbook. Just thought you should know. He smiled, small and private, and closed the message. Outside his office window, the city moved on. Carlton metrics would survive. Sure, but they'd never run the same. And they'd never forget that moment in the boardroom when silence pointed to Amanda and everything cracked open. Turns out leadership potential doesn't mean much when the system was always running on one guy's quiet weekends.